Hello, welcome back. I'm Jen Judson, Defense News, the land warfare reporter, and I am here with Army Secretary Christine Wormuth. Thank you so much for joining us here at AUSA at our booth. I had a chance to listen to your speech this morning, and was particularly interested in hearing a little bit more about some of the things that you're doing for families, for soldiers, where they're living. I think one of the interesting things that you're working on in terms of barrack reforms is, you're putting out a strategy. You're going to be funding it, I think, at about $4 billion more in barracks maintenance beyond what you were already spending. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what more can you do now if you were to get that $4 billion in extra funding that you couldn't do with the funding that you had. What are some of the things that you're going to be doing to help improve military barracks? What are some of the problems that you're hoping to fix? And do you think it's feasible to get it done by 2030?
So let me clarify, first of all, Jen, the piece I think that came out in the last couple of days that was talking about the permanent barracks strategy, that is what I would call an aspirational strategy.
Okay.
That was not a document that I signed out or that General George signed out. So the good news about it is, we do have a plan mapped out, if you will, for how we could improve our permanent barracks. But a big part of how we would improve our permanent barracks is by getting more money. And right now, $4 billion is more than, frankly, we can afford inside of our current top line. Now, General George and I are, building the FY25 budget request to go to Congress right now. We are looking at and working on trying to put more money from within our top line than we have to date. So, we've been doing $1 billion a year. We'd like to try to increase that a little bit. And then we are also hoping to ensure that our budget request provides for 100% of barracks sustainment, whereas in the past we've only been sustaining up to 85%. So that would be an improvement. To do some of the things that are outlined in that barracks strategy would require yet more funding on top of that. And I think, there's a lot of support on Capitol Hill on both sides of the aisle for improving our barracks. But, I think we're going to have to keep talking to Congress about, what they can accommodate given that they control the power of the purse.
Okay, and beyond barracks, what else are you doing to improve family housing on bases at this point?
Yeah, a couple of things. Well, we continue to work closely with our privatized housing partners. And so, for example, we have broken ground to build more housing at Fort Carson. We are working on completing the land sale at Fort Bliss to be able to help get money to Fort Leonard Wood. And another thing I'm very interested in, although it's early days, is we're looking at doing a pilot for a privatized barracks, actually, at Fort Irwin. That would be, I don't know if you've seen the Pacific Beacon facility that the Navy has out in San Diego, but it is fabulous. It has a rooftop pool. I mean, it's nice. Wow. So we're exploring whether we might be able to do something like that, starting with Fort Irwin.
Okay, fascinating. All right. Shifting over to modernization outside of, what you're doing in terms of living, you've got a lot of modernization programs underway to get after a modernized Army in 2030, and then looking even beyond that to 2040, you're looking at really transforming the force. But to get to 2030, you have a variety of programs that you are trying to push through various milestones. You had the goal of getting 24 systems by the end of 2023, and yes, you are hitting the mark on most of them. Are there any that may not quite make it in 2023? Anything in terms of programs that you're evaluating? I know that there were some issues with the extended range cannon artillery, some challenges that you're looking to get through. So just curious if there's anything that you're concerned about when it comes to certain modernization programs meeting their milestones to get to 2030.
Sure. Well, you put your finger on it. The Extended Range Cannon Artillery program is the one that I think has had the most challenges. We've had some engineering challenges with the gun. So that program, I think, is probably not going to get across the finish line this year. You know, we're going to sort of work our way through that. I think there are a couple of different options. You know, we still have an interest, obviously, in having an artillery system that has longer range.
That requirement is not gone. Yeah.
That's right. So we'll continue looking at that. Obviously, I'd like to see us have a successful flight test for the long-range hypersonics weapon. That program has been, it's really a 4-year program. It's a 10-year program, rather, in sort of a 4-year time frame. So it's gone remarkably fast. But we need to obviously see it be successfully flight tested. And then I think, most of the other programs are doing quite well. We've worked out, I think, some of the kinks that we saw in IVAS. DEM SHORAD, I think, is doing quite well. So generally, I feel quite good about all of the programs.
Okay. Just in terms of the long-range hypersonic weapon, obviously the last test was canceled, and I know you probably can't go into detail as to why, but, are you confident, based on what the issues were, and I know you can't share them, that we could potentially at least still hit the mark and being able to deliver the actual missiles to the unit by the end of 2023, or is that a little bit less of a realistic goal, maybe given what you're observing in terms of what needs to be done in testing to get to that point?
I think it's still a possibility. I can't say anything really about what happened with that test, but I can say we have a very good understanding of what happened with the last test, and of course are working to make sure that issue is solved. I think what I would point out is, this is a completely new weapon system. And with a completely new weapon system, you don't know what you don't know. We certainly, our engineers and all of the great people associated with that program are doing everything they can to sort of think through every possible, chain of events, if you will, or branch and sequel, and try to, tie off any problem areas. But this is a very new program. So I feel good about it. But like I said, it's 10 years of work that we've been doing in 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, that is moving impressively quickly. In terms of programs going into 2030, what are some of the milestones that you have your eye on, beyond what we were looking at in 2023? There's still plenty of programs that are a little farther behind some of these others that still need to drive to 2030. So what are some of the milestones in 2024 that you are watching for, particularly when it comes to some of these major modernization efforts?
Well, obviously we did the down select for FLRAA, and we're going to keep a close eye on, how that program proceeds going forward. And we've chosen 2 vendors, obviously, for XM30, and that's for folks who haven't been, watching closely, formerly known as Optionally Manned Fighting Vehicle. But so, there's that program is going to be hitting some significant milestones in the future. Those are some of the biggies. But we have a number of programs still that, are still in development. Yeah. So there's still quite a bit that we've got to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think really fascinating, and you touched on this in your speech this morning, the human-machine integration element, obviously robotics, there's a big emphasis on some capabilities in 2030 when it comes to a robotic combat vehicle, those kind of things. But as you have tasked Army Futures Command with really looking kind of beyond 2030 to 2040, and what those formations are going to look like, with robotics, with autonomous systems as well. I know that there's a warfighting concept that should follow sort of the multi-domain operations doctrine. It's part of the cycle, right? And there's a draft that I think last time you spoke you had received. If you had a chance to take a look at that, is there anything you can share about some of the kind of initial insights that, might be present in the warfighting concept that are a bit different from the multi-domain operations doctrine?
I will be honest, I have the draft sitting on my desk.
There's a lot to do.
But with everything we've been doing on the rollout of all of the big decisions on recruiting and, getting ready for this, getting ready to go up and brief Congress on our force structure work, I have not been able to look at it in detail. Yes. But I look forward to that. I think it's fantastic that General Rainey and the Army Futures team has really jumped into that, even though frankly the ink isn't all that dry on FM 3-0.
A year ago.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that'll be probably late fall's project for me.
Okay, all right. Well, happy reading. So you did also mention in your speech this morning that you will be going to Congress to talk about force structure. I know that you don't want to get ahead of those discussions with Congress, but what can you say in terms of the type of support that you're seeking from Congress? Are you going to be asking for pretty dramatic changes to force structure, cutting it, rebuilding it in some way? What's sort of the nature of what you're presenting to Congress, without going into the details that you need to lay out?
Sure. What we're trying to do is really two things, frankly. We are trying to make room inside of our end strength for all of these new capabilities, for the formations that would receive, the new capabilities, whether it's integrated air and missile defense or vertical lift, or MSHORAD, for example. And we are making that transformation, if you will, at a time where obviously our end strength has come down because of the recruiting challenges that we've made. So we're trying to close the gap between the number of authorized spaces we had at 485,000 down to much more like 453,000. Although actually we're allowing ourselves to carry some overstructure. So we're really looking at, we need to find 22,000 spaces of things that we can shed, essentially, or adapt to make room for that new structure. And it's really important because, as I said in my speech, we've got to have the formations with the right capabilities, and we've got to have those formations properly manned, because if they aren't manned, it's going to be hollow structure, and that's not what we want.
Okay. How iterative of a process is this? Are we going to see in like the FY25 budget a revamping of the force structure, or is this kind of like, as capabilities say come online, or as you see a need, we will see shifts in the force structure in particular areas, for instance? How are you kind of looking at that?
One of the pacing items, if you will, for this transformation is how quickly we bring the new systems into the force. So this transformation of force structure will happen over time. It will not happen all at once. We will start in getting rid of some particular spaces in FY25, and we will sort of continue that process of thinning out some of the capabilities we don't need as much, and then bringing in the capabilities that we need much more of. But it is built over a 5-year timeline. Okay. And the other thing I would say is, the other pacing item, if you will, is how well we do in recruiting. So, my hope is, we've done well this year. We've put a whole set of decisions into place that I think will help us with recruiting. And if we can get recruiting back to where we need it to be, we will not, we would then be in a position to not have to make additional cuts to force structure. And just to go back to your first question on this, this is not going to be a dramatic transformation. This is going to be some shifts here or there. For the most part, this is not going to be some fundamental set of changes that will be widely visible.
Yes. So on recruiting, it seems like you're doing better this year than last year. And I think about a year ago or so with the budget cycle, there was sort of a path to get back to, the intended end strength over, 4 or 5 years, let's say. Do you think that the trends this year is pointing to, say, maybe a recruiting resolution by the end of next year where you're really seeing the numbers back up where you want them to be? Or do you think this is going to be a longer process to get the recruiting levels right to be able to meet the end strength that you want?
It's going to be a longer process. I've said for some time now that it's going to be a multi-year process. We didn't get to where we are in a year, and we're not going to get out of where we are in a year. Even doing better this year than we did last year, I still anticipate that our end strength may go down a little bit more next year, in part because we have significantly drawn into our delayed entry program. So that bank account that helps us, keep our end strength up has been depleted. But I think the chief and I feel that with the new set of decisions, which themselves will take some time to implement, we are going to be on a path to steadily start climbing back up.
Okay. All right. And last question for you. I wanted to address just the overall organic industrial base and the industrial base. Quite challenged, trying to replenish everything that we're sending into Ukraine and potentially other operations, it seems. So just curious, what are some of the areas that you're watching closely? We've made a lot of, I think, progress with the 155 millimeter munition production. Are there any other production areas or single sources of failure that you're kind of keeping your eye on, as we look to kind of move quicker in certain areas, whether it's within the organic industrial base or the overall defense industrial base? What are some of the things that you're kind of keeping your eye on that could concern you and that potentially we need to focus more on?
I think a couple of things have come out strongly in some of the conversations I've had with our partners in industry. One is, there's still concerns about supply chain fragility. There are still some second and third tier suppliers that are struggling sometimes to find particular parts. And so continuing to work to shore up those supply chains is important. Another theme that's emerged in some of the conversations I've had is the workforce, is just being able, just as we face a challenging recruiting market, labor market, I think our industry partners are seeing that. And being able to hire people, getting them to show up 5 days a week is still a challenge in some places. So those are two things that I'm going to keep my eye on. But I want to commend, frankly, both what we've done in the Army on our own organic industrial base, but also with our industry partners. A huge amount of work has gone in, through the support that Congress has given us to really grow out the capacity of the industrial base. And I think that's a really important step.
Absolutely. Well, we're out of time, but thank you so much, Secretary Wormuth, for joining me today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your AOSA.
Thanks. Good to see you again.
And congratulations on completing the Army 10 miler.
Thank you.